No one ever told me that damnation could feel so sweet. I certainly never read such a blasphemous notion in the holy texts, nor heard it in the stern sermons of the ecclesiarchy. Quite the opposite. Sin was to bring only suffering, they said. Heresy would damn not just your soul, but torment your very flesh. And yet here I am, my soul surely damned beyond any hope, and all I feel is ecstasy. A dark, blooming ecstasy that dulls every memory of pious hardship I once cherished. In this moment, kneeling in the blood of both the guilty and the innocent, I feel more alive than I ever did swathed in the Emperor's light. The paradox would almost make me laugh, if I hadn't already laughed enough at the cruel joke fate has played on me. Perhaps I should start at the beginning, the day I began to fall, so you might understand how a devoted daughter of the Imperium could come to revel in heresy. I remember the moment with painful clarity, painful only in hindsight. At the time, it was anything but. It began on a world whose name I have since forgotten, a dusty, forsaken hive city overrun by heretics. I was there as a proud daughter of the Adepta Sororitas, a battle sister of the Order of the Sacred Rose. Our order had been dispatched to purge a Slaanesh cult that had taken root in the city's decay. We were zealous and confident. For months we had scoured the hive's depths, flushing out sin with holy promethium and blessed bolt rounds. I recall the smoke of incense clinging inside my rebreather, the weight of my bolter steady in hands that did not yet tremble. My faith back then was a fortress, unquestioning, unyielding. Within those armored walls of conviction, no doubt could find purchase, or so I believed. The final battle in that wretched city took place beneath a collapsed manufactorum deep in the underhive where the cult had built a profane shrine. The air was thick with ozone and the cloying scent of forbidden pleasures. Spilled perfume and blood mingled on the cold stone floor. My squad advanced in purity and wrath. I remember Sister Superior Karine at my side, her flamer turning whole crowds of depraved cultists into screaming pillars of fire. We chanted litanies over the roar of gunfire. I shouted the psalm of the righteous at the top of my lungs to drown out the unholy music the cultists played. Yes, music. Can you imagine? Those heretics dared to greet us with jangles of discordant melody, some feverish piping and drums to accompany their slaughter. At the time, I only registered it as noise to be purged. Only later would I recall it as the first tendril of temptation curling into my ear. Bolter fire thudded in my hands. Each recoil punched my shoulder. Back then, it was simply routine, the familiar kick of duty. How bizarre that later on I would come to savor that kick as one might savor a lover's playful bite. But I get ahead of myself. We cut the cultists down in droves. They were mostly untrained degenerates, clad in shards of silk and scraps of leather, their bodies painted with symbols of Slaanesh. They fell screaming praises to their dark prince even as we silenced them. Righteously, we silenced them. At the heart of that lair, amidst toppled pillars wrapped in obscene graffiti, we found the cult's leader. A lithe woman, almost inhumanly beautiful despite the corruption staining her soul. She stood atop a dais before a cracked mirror that towered behind her like some twisted altarpiece. In her hands, she cradled a small object, something that glinted with a violet light. Even as our guns trained on her, she smiled, not with fear or anger, but with a knowing, taunting mirth. I can still see her eyes locking to mine through the glow, see the strange recognition in her gaze as if she knew me intimately. "You're too late, brides of the corpse god," the cult leader hissed. Her voice was low and honeyed, cutting through the cacophony with unnatural clarity. "She has already claimed one of yours." I did not understand her words then. I assumed it the typical delusional rant of a heretic. Claimed one of us? Ridiculous. We were sororitas. Our faith was our shield. No chaos taint could pierce the armor of our devotion. Sister Superior Kareen shouted for her to surrender. In response, the heretic woman simply threw back her head and laughed, the sound rich and sultry, wrongly enticing to the ear. Then all at once she shattered the object in her hands against the mirror behind her. There was a flash of violet light so bright I thought myself struck blind. The mirror exploded, raining shards of silvered glass across the chamber. I instinctively raised my arm to shield my eyes. All around, my sisters cried out in alarm. For an instant, an unbearable sensation crackled through the air, a wave of warmth and euphoria that washed over my skin. It was as though some invisible tongue had caressed every inch of my body at once. I gasped. My heart, both literally and figuratively, fluttered with an alien pleasure. The sensation vanished almost as soon as it came, leaving me shocked and trembling. I fought to regain composure, furious that the witch's trick had made me feel that. I redoubled my grip on my bolter. The cult leader still stood on the dais, now empty-handed. Shards of the mirror glittered at her feet. She was wounded. One large shard of glass had pierced her abdomen when the mirror burst. Rich red blood poured down the front of her diaphanous gown, yet she smiled through it, sinking slowly to her knees. With her remaining strength, she smeared her blood across her bare midsection in some kind of symbol, one I recognized with disgust as the serpent-like swooping slash of Slaanesh's mark. Sister Kareen bellowed, "Blam the witch!" And I did not hesitate. I emptied my bolter's remaining rounds into that laughing heretic. My shots tore bloody flowers open in her chest. She jerked and collapsed, lifeless, but still smiling. Emperor's mercy, she died smiling. Silence fell in the ruined shrine. The battle was over. Other cult survivors had fled into tunnels or died to the last. I stood there breathing hard, my blood up and skin still tingling strangely from whatever witchcraft she'd triggered. The others felt it too. I saw Sister Johanna shivering, mouthing the litany of purity. Kareen made the sign of the Akala across her breastplate, intoning "The Emperor Protects." We began gathering anything remotely heretical to be sanctified or destroyed, profane idols, their musical instruments of sin, that sort of thing. That's when my eyes fell to the artifact lying amid the mirror's debris. It was a curious little thing, half of the shattered object the cult leader had smashed. The rest was presumably vaporized in the burst of energy, but one fragment remained intact. I approached it warily. It looked like a chunk of some crystalline material about the size of my palm. Smooth, violet, and gold in color, laced with delicate etchings or script. It almost looked like a piece of broken amulet or a decorative lens. Faint wisps of pinkish smoke wafted from it, dissipating as I watched. I knew I should call out to Sister Kareen, have it collected for destruction. We were thorough in cleansing battlefields. Anything tainted must be burned under the Prometheum's flame, purified by a priest or taken by the Ordo Hereticus for study. And certainly this item reeked of the warp. Standing over it, I felt the hairs on my arms rise, as if a static charge danced over my skin. Yet, I hesitated. There was a whisper. I thought perhaps one of my sisters behind me had spoken, so I half turned, but no. They were busy across the chamber, none near enough to have whispered in my ear. The whisper had no distinct words, more an insinuation of sound, and I had the strangest notion it came from the fragment at my feet. My mouth had gone dry. Cautiously, I knelt and reached out a gauntleted hand to pick up the shard. The moment my fingers closed around it, a warmth pulsed through my glove, into my flesh. I nearly dropped it. It felt as though I'd snatched a hot coal, yet it did not burn. It thrummed. A second whisper curled through my mind, almost like a sigh of satisfaction. My vision swam with fleeting images, an impression of a grand hall filled with music, flashes of countless candles, a flutter of silk against my skin. I shook my head violently and the images fled, like waking from a momentary daydream. I quickly tucked the crystal shard into a belt pouch. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was securing it for the inquisitor or priest to examine later. That was all. But in truth, I felt oddly protective of it, unwilling to let anyone else even see it. In the corner of my eye, I thought I saw Sister Karine observing me, so I briskly turned and shouted, "Area clear, ma'am. Just more filth to burn here." She nodded and moved on, trusting my word. That lie was my first act of deception against my sisters. So small, so easily justified at the time. I've replayed that moment countless times since. It would have been so simple to call out, to hand the shard over then and there, let the flames purge its taint. Had I done so, the story I'm telling would be very different. Or perhaps no story at all, just another unsung faithful daughter of the Emperor doing her duty. Instead, I kept it. The weight of that shard at my side was somehow comforting as we made our way out of the cult's den. Comforting. Emperor, forgive me. I was finding comfort in a corrupted trinket while standing amidst the corpses of heretics. But at the time, I was in denial of that fact. I told myself I simply wanted to personally deliver it to our canoness or the Inquisition for extra diligence. Lies we tell ourselves can be so convincing, especially when whispered with our own voice. Our company returned to the surface victorious. There was rejoicing among the hive's remaining faithful citizens. I recall a makeshift celebration in the Grand Plaza, half ruined by war but serviceable enough for a gathering. The planetary governor, a pompous fool, insisted on holding a banquet in our honor. We sisters partook sparingly of the food and drink, of course. Discipline and decorum were ever our guide. I sat at a long table in my full battle armor, helmet off out of courtesy, politely chewing on flavorless ration bread, while around me, flush-faced nobles gorged themselves on fine wines and candied fruits. Normally, such opulence would raise my ire. I took pride in my ascetic habits. But that night, I smelled the aroma of spiced meats, and it was like a hook in my belly. My mouth watered in a way it never had before. Every scent was amplified. The perfumes of the hive nobility didn't just smell cloying. They were an almost tangible presence, a bouquet of intoxicating flowers invading my senses. I tried to focus on reciting the canticle of Saint Dominica under my breath to distract myself from temptation. But even the act of speaking holy words felt oddly hollow. My voice sounded different to my own ears. When I uttered the prayer, I could hear how dry and dutiful it was, compared to the lush, syrupy tones of the cult leader's voice, echoing in memory. A thought stole through me. Had I ever sounded as fervent and alive as that heretic did, even in her blasphemy? I quickly crushed that comparison, ashamed to even think it. Sitting there amid laughter and clinking goblets, I became aware of the shard hidden in my pouch, as if it was calling out to me softly. With everyone distracted, I dared to slip my hand under the table and touch the fragment again. A tiny jolt of pleasure shot up my arm at the contact. I bit my lip to contain a gasp, a flush rising to my cheeks. Immediately, I understood the danger. I was in public, surrounded by fellow sisters and imperial officials. Anyone could see the change in my expression. Summoning all my will, I steadied myself and removed my hand from the pouch. My heart was pounding far too fast. I covered by taking a sip of water, pretending I'd just swallowed something spicy. I should have thrown it away right then, hurled the cursed shard into one of the banquet's braziers, and watched it crackle to ash. But I did not. I could not. Some part of me desperately hungered for what I had just felt. It was such a small sampling, a mere brush of strange delight, but already I craved more of it, like a parched pilgrim who'd tasted a drop of pure spring water. That craving frightened me nearly as much as it enticed me. Later that night, back in the austere barracks that had been allotted to our squad, I knelt on the cold stone floor and tried to pray. The other sisters were asleep or on sentry duty. I had a rare moment alone, the perfect time to seek the Emperor's guidance. Oh, how pious I must have looked, armored knees on rock, hands clasped, lit by a single guttering candle beside my cot. But piety is meaningless when the mind wanders, and mine did. The words of the litany of purity droned from my lips, yet in my head all I could think of was the shard. I thought of the warmth it gave, the images it showed me. Despite myself, I found my free hand drifting to the pouch at my waist where it lay hidden. I caught myself, horrified. No, I mustn't. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to recenter. Faith is my shield, I whispered, almost pleading. The Emperor is my strength. The Emperor protects. But in the stillness that followed my quavering prayer, I heard a whisper in return. Are you sure? My eyes snapped open. The voice had not been mine. It was soft, almost gentle, with a hint of amusement, as though chuckling at my pious mantra. I darted a glance around the dark barracks, half expecting to see a lurking figure, but of course there was no one. Only sleeping forms of my sisters in their cots and the soft rasp of their breath. The whisper had come from within or from unseen corners of the room. I felt a chill. Had one of the cult's demons followed us? Was I being haunted by some warp-spawned specter from that shattered mirror? Clarity cut through my fear. If that were true, then I was tainted. If a warp entity had attached itself to me, even unknowingly, I would have to report it. Standard protocol demanded immediate quarantine and purification rituals. If those failed, execution to protect the others. The very thought made me feel ill, not because I feared death. I had long ago resigned my life to the Emperor's will, but because an execution for taint would be a mark of eternal shame. To die as a martyr in battle is one thing, glorious and pure. To die as a corrupted thing, to be remembered as a fallen sister, it was unthinkable. I couldn't let that happen, wouldn't let that happen. I forced myself to breathe slowly, evenly. Perhaps I was overreacting. The whisper might have been just my imagination or a lingering effect of the cult leader's psychic attack earlier. Yes, that seemed plausible. Those sensations we all felt when the mirror broke, some warp residual could still be teasing my mind. It would pass. And if it didn't, well, I would root it out myself. Determination hardened in me. I was a sister of battle. My faith had been my armor for decades. It would serve me now. I stood and retrieved a penitence kit from my trunk. Within the small iron box lay the instruments of purification by pain, a barbed flail for flagellation, a set of spiked prayer beads, a razor for bloodletting. I had used them before, of course, as all devout servants did on occasion of sin or failure. Usually, just a few lashes were enough to remind one of the Emperor's sacrifices and banish impure thoughts. Tonight, my soul felt far more burdened than a few lashes could cleanse. I shrugged off my upper armor, exposing my back and shoulders, and began to recite the litany of cleansing under my breath. Whack! The first strike of the flail tore across my bare back, its barbs scratching out red lines of penance. I hissed in pain. Whack! A second blow, harder. Penance must be earned. The pain blossomed bright and hot. I clenched my teeth and continued the prayers. Whack! A third, a fourth. My skin was on fire, each strike sending a jolt through my frame. By the fifth lash, tears of pain and devotion pricked my eyes. And yet, beneath the pain, or perhaps threaded through it, was a strand of pleasure. I nearly dropped the flail in shock as a sudden wave of euphoria rippled from the fresh wounds. I bit back a moan. Thrown of terror, what was happening? My vision swam, my breaths came in ragged, shameful gasps. I could feel warm blood trickling down my back in thin rivulets, and it felt good. Not just relief of duty done. It felt like tender fingers trailing down my spine. Disgust and fear warred with a rising, horrible delight. This was wrong. So wrong. Penance was not meant to be enjoyed. It was sacred suffering, a holy duty to mortify the flesh and reaffirm purity. To take pleasure in it, that was perversion of the highest order. I hurled the flail away from me, letting it clatter to the floor. My breaths shuddered. In the dim candlelight, I caught sight of myself in a small, polished steel mirror set on the wall, an object for inspecting one's uniform. What I saw there made my heart stutter. Kneeling, half-naked, sweat slick and flushed, with a halo of weak candlelight painting flickering shadows over my form, I looked like a stranger. My usually pale cheeks were ruddy, lips parted, eyes bright with unshed tears. There was an expression there I had never seen on my face, a languid, yearning look, the look of a woman indulging in forbidden ecstasies. It was vile. It was alluring. It was me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head as if I could deny reality. "This isn't me. I am pure. I am faithful." My reflection sneered as if in mockery of my thoughts. I turned away from the mirror, unable to bear it, and collapsed onto the floor. Angry, confused sobs racked my body. In my whole life, I had never felt so helpless. Not when I was a little orphan girl taken in by the Schola Progenium, not during the harsh training and indoctrination of the Order, not even when facing towering chaos spawn on the battlefield. I always had the Emperor to strengthen me in those times. I always had his light. Where was that light now? Why did I feel only darkness and heat coiling inside me? Why were my wounds not bringing me clarity as they should, but rather seducing my senses further? I wanted to scream at the walls, to beg the God Emperor for a sign, for the slightest touch of grace to rescue me from the pit I was sliding into. But I was afraid there would be no answer. Or perhaps worse, afraid that the only answer would be the whisper I'd heard before, laughing softly at my plight. I bandaged my back with unsteady hands, every brush of cloth making me wince and blush at once. I fumbled out a simple gray shift to cover myself, suddenly feeling too exposed even alone. Sleep. Perhaps if I slept, this nightmare would abate. Exhaustion weighed on me. My body and mind were wrung out. Yes, rest. In the morning, I'd confess to the canoness. No, not the whole truth. I couldn't possibly reveal the extent of this depravity, but I would report that I suspected a lingering warp taint on me from the mission. We'd quarantine me, do some rites of exorcism. There was a chance I could still be saved without being condemned. The canoness was strict, but she was not unreasonable. She had seen many strange things. If I approached it as a loyal servant concerned about a possible impurity, perhaps I could be pulled back from the brink before I truly fell. Clinging to that sliver of hope, I climbed into my cot, drawing the rough blanket over my aching, feverish body. I realized with a start that I hadn't even thought about what to do with the shard. I had left it in my belt pouch, which now lay tossed on the floor with my armor. A part of me panicked. It's not secured. But another part of me reasoned, with weary resignation, that it hardly mattered at this point. The damage was done. One little shard was the least of my worries compared to the rot I felt growing in my soul. Eventually, I slipped into a fitful sleep, and that was when the dreams came. They started as fragments, a flash of that grand hall again, pillars of black marble veined with gold, endless and opulent. I saw silken drapes billowing in a wind heavy with incense. A haunting music echoed from somewhere unseen, distant pipes and chimes that made my nerves tingle. I felt the brush of hands, or were they claws, across my bare arms, yet I saw no one beside me. I was dancing, I realized with shock, even though I could not dance, had never learned nor ever wished to. But in the dream I moved with perfect grace, each step an exuberance of freedom. I wore a flowing gown that shifted colors as I twirled. One moment it was purest white like a novice's robes, then it darkened to deep purple, then to black, trimmed with scarlet, reminiscent of my own order's battle habit. It kept changing, as did my surroundings. The hall melted into an open courtyard under a sky of rippling dusk. I danced onward, compelled by the music, by the exultation flooding me. With a start, I saw that around me danced others, faceless silhouettes that nonetheless felt companionable, like old friends. A figure took shape before me, and I reached out to them, laughing. For the first time I could remember I was truly laughing, carefree and joyous. The figure's face resolved. It was Sister Superior Karine. She smiled warmly, approvingly. I blinked, and her face shifted. It was the Canoness now, older and sterner, but she too gave me a proud nod as she whirled past. Then, one by one, more faces, some I knew, some I did not, flickered on the dancers. An inquisitor I once met, a drill abbot from the Schola, even the planetary governor from earlier that evening, all grinning in merriment. I laughed all the harder. How wonderful for them to join me in this revel. We were celebrating something, weren't we? Yes, of course, celebrating victory. The cult was defeated, I was safe and pure, and this was our triumph dance. Wasn't it grand? The music climbed to a feverish pitch. I caught sight of myself in the reflection of a polished marble column. I was no longer wearing a shifting gown, but my own black power armor, the raiment of a sister of battle. It gleamed, freshly anointed, the icons of the ecclesiarchy embossed in silver and gold. A purity seal fluttered from my shoulder plate as I spun. Pride filled me. I saw my face, young, faithful, glowing with a radiant smile. The Emperor's symbol glowed on my chest. This is how it should be, I thought in the dream. This is how he sees me, his loyal daughter rejoicing in duty. Then the music changed. A discordant note slithered through the melody, and the laughter around me turned to gasps and moans that sounded less like joy and more like pleasure. I stopped dancing, suddenly uneasy. The faces of my dance partners turned blank again, masks of shadow. Their forms pressed closer to me. I felt hands on my armored shoulders, tugging at the clasps. "No," I protested. "Stop, what are you—" My voice was drowned out by a sultry laugh that echoed from above. I looked up at the sky, or rather the ceiling that the courtyard suddenly had. The sky had become the interior of a grand cathedral, its arched roof painted with lewd frescoes of demons and humans entwined in every conceivable excess. At the center was a colossal figure, half shrouded in swirling mist and silks, watching me with many glowing eyes. "Sweet child," the figure purred, its voice at once male and female and indescribably enticing. "Why do you resist? This is what you were born for." I tried to break away from the grasping hands, but my armor was gone. When had that happened? I was in a flimsy gown of diaphanous material, barely concealing anything. Panic surged through me, even as a traitorous part of my mind thrilled at the exposure. "Born for? No! I serve the Emperor!" I cried out. The towering figure descended slowly, its form ever shifting but vaguely humanoid, with impossible curves and angles. Its presence exuded authority and affection in equal measure, a parental indulgence that both comforted and terrified me. It reached out, one exquisitely manicured claw under my chin, tilting my face up. I saw its eyes then, twin pools of swirling, iridescent color in a face too beautiful for words. My thoughts cracked in awe. Looking into those eyes was like gazing into the raw truth of every secret desire I'd ever suppressed. All the things I never allowed myself to want, reflected back at me in prismatic splendor. I trembled. "No one here will judge you, my lovely one," the being cooed. It stroked my cheek tenderly. "You are so tired of the struggle, aren't you? So weary of wearing that mask of dutiful purity. I know. I see what you deny yourself." Tears welled in my eyes, to my confusion and shame. I can't. I couldn't form words. Its touch was sending warmth coursing through me, a gentle and utterly wrong comfort that nonetheless made me want to lean in like a cat seeking petting. "Shh, hush now. There is no need to speak. Just feel." The voice wound through my mind like a lullaby. "You delight me, child. Such potential in you, such passion caged by guilt. Release it." The world around us shifted again. The grasping silhouettes vanished. The cathedral melted into a more intimate space, a boudoir lavishly decorated with silks and cushions. The being, whom I now realized with dawning horror, could only be a daemon of Slaanesh, perhaps even an aspect of Slaanesh itself, reclined on a chaise, guiding me to sit beside it. I did so without resistance. My will was eroded, buried under waves of its charisma. In any other circumstance, I would have bitten off my own tongue and choked on it before willingly consorting with the creature of chaos. But in that dream, I was disarmed, laid bare in all ways. It continued to speak in low, melodious tones, words dripping into my ear like honey. I can't recall them all perfectly. Some, I'm certain, were in no human language, yet I understood the meaning behind them. It spoke of pleasure unending, of freedom from all shackles, of being truly seen and loved for all that I was, flaws, desires, and all. It spoke of how my service thus far had been admirable, but oh so rigid, that the grand scheme of the universe held more for me than blind obedience. I remember shaking my head weakly in denial at times, and the daemon simply pressed a silken finger to my lips with a playful tisk. When I managed to stammer that I belonged to the Emperor, that I would never betray him, the demon gave a throaty laugh that somehow didn't mock, but empathized. "But has he not already betrayed you?" came the purring question. My heart lurched at that. "No, he would never," I protested, but the doubt was seeded. The creature's many-hued eyes grew sorrowful. "Poor dear, all your life, giving, and what joy has your Emperor allowed you?" It asked softly. Images assaulted me. Myself as a young novice scrubbing floors in a convent, hungry and tired. Myself standing vigil for 24 hours in the cold as a trial of endurance. Myself watching fellow sisters die in battle, consoling myself that it was his will. Myself kneeling in prayer day after day, begging for strength or signs and hearing nothing in return but my own echo. No. This was wrong, twisted. Yes, service was hard. It was meant to be hard. Sacrifice was the path of purity. We did not serve for reward or joy, but out of duty and faith. I tried to cling to that truth, but the vision of my life's hardship, juxtaposed with the sheer bliss I'd tasted in recent hours, made my convictions falter. The daemon gently wiped a tear from my cheek, and my skin burned pleasantly where its claw traced. "He is a god of sacrifice, not of love, child. He demands your life, your pain, your compliance, but never gives you a smile, a touch." The demon leaned close, its breath sweet and intoxicating on my face. You wonder why you feel nothing when you pray now. It is because there was never anything to feel, only your own will echoing back at you in that lonely void. A sob escaped me. In that dream, in that moment, those words cut to the core of a doubt I hadn't even realized was inside me. A secret buried in my heart. I have never felt the Emperor's presence. Not once. We all profess that we do, that in moments of crisis we sense his guiding hand. I had repeated such lines myself, convincing myself of their truth. But in the deepest honesty, I never truly felt anything but my own resolve and the camaraderie of my sisters. I assumed that was what faith was, a choice, an action, not a literal sensation. Now this creature was telling me that was because the Emperor did not answer, did not truly provide the warmth of love I unconsciously yearned for. He protects, I murmured weakly, repeating the old formula even as doubt churned. The daemon gave a pitying smile. Does he, or is it you who protect him with every sacrifice? It tisked sadly. My prince of pleasure, if you would but meet her gaze, would never be so cruelly distant. She rewards those who embrace her. Every whisper, every touch you felt, that is her gift to you, little one. She is watching, listening, waiting to lavish you with the ecstasy you deserve. I closed my eyes, trying to shut it out. But behind my lids, I saw again that cult leader's dying smile, heard her voice. She has already claimed one of yours. Was it true? Had Slaanesh's gaze fallen upon me, marked me as theirs from the start? The thought was terrifying and enthralling. Chosen? Me? Yes, you, the voice in the dream answered my unspoken thought, with amusement dancing in its tone. Why else do you think you feel so much? Such exquisite potential. The Dark Prince adores finding gems among the drab gravel. You could shine if only you stopped fighting yourself. And then those unseen hands were on me again. Only now they felt seen, felt real. A dozen clever touches skimming over my arms, my neck, tracing the dried blood on my back from my earlier penance wounds. Every place they touched ignited in delight. I cried out, but it was not pain I cried out from. The demon leaned back with a satisfied smile as my eyes fluttered and my back arched involuntarily. You see, even your flesh responds to her call. The air was heavy with a heady musk. I could barely think. I wanted... Emperor, forgive me. I wanted more of this feeling. The craving was like a hot coal in my gut now. The demon's eyes flashed, knowing exactly the state I was in. Take it, child. Take what you desire. There is no shame here, no fire or brimstone waiting to consume you for indulging. There is only joy. With that, the music swelled again, and the dream began to fray in a whirl of color and sensation. I don't recall every detail, just a kaleidoscope of forbidden pleasures that I experienced with abandon in that dream realm. Laughter and cries that might have been mine, the brush of silky fur and cool chains, the taste of fruit and blood intermingled, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in time with distant drums. It was overwhelming, far too much for any mortal mind to hold on to fully. Perhaps mercifully, much of it evaporated from conscious memory when I awoke. But the feelings lingered. By the throne did they linger. I jolted awake at dawn, my body drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I shot upright in bed, disoriented. For a moment, I expected to see that opulent boudoir around me, to see the impossible demon lying at my side. But I was back in the dim barracks, the candle long since burnt out. Morning light crept through a high window. I pressed a hand to my mouth, stifling a sob or a scream. I wasn't sure which was about to erupt. Possibly both. My skin still hummed with the afterglow of those dream sensations. Emperor, have mercy. I could still smell the sweet incense in the air, though likely it was only the mundane aroma of our simple oil lamp fuel. For several minutes, I just sat there shaking. I tried to recite the litany against corruption, but the words jumbled on my tongue. I felt so defiled. Yet in that very moment of self-disgust, I also felt an ache of longing as the last traces of euphoria ebbed. Part of me wanted to squeeze my eyes shut and see if I could force the dream to return, to grab onto some fragment of it. My cheeks burned with shame at the thought. I climbed from bed on unsteady legs and hurried to wash myself. Using a basin of frigid water, I scrubbed my skin until it was red, as if I could scour away the unseen filth. The wounds on my back stung. I think I might have opened one lash cut because a thin trickle of blood ran down to the towel at my waist as I cleaned. The pain was at least clear, sharp. It helped ground me. I am awake. I am penitent. I am loyal. I repeated these thoughts. But loyal to what? A treacherous inner voice queried. I forced it aside. I dressed in my sororitas bodysuit and reassembled my power armor by rote, piece by piece, hands on autopilot. The familiarity of the routine was a small comfort. Each plate and joint in place, the reassuring weight of my cuirass pressing on my shoulders, the helm enclosing my head like a safety shell. Like this, armored up, I could almost pretend I was the same woman as before. A stalwart battle sister about to begin another day of service. Almost. It wasn't until I was nearly finished strapping on my gear that I noticed something amiss. My belt pouches. One was hanging open. The one which held the shard. My heart lurched. I snatched it up. It was empty. In a panic, I dropped to my knees, searching around the cot and floor. No sign of it. By all that's holy, had someone found it? Taken it? If one of my sisters discovered a chaos-tainted object in my things, the alarm would be raised in an instant. I would be dragged before the canoness and... No, Emperor, please no. I frantically lifted blankets, peered under the cot, even checked inside my trunk, though I knew I hadn't put it there. My thoughts raced. Perhaps I had lost it somewhere during the dream's delirium. Or perhaps, darker thought, that warp dream visitation by the demon had not been merely psychological. What if it had claimed the shard somehow? It did seem to originate from that shattered mirror after all. Perhaps a piece of its essence was inside it. If that essence left, maybe the crystal just disintegrated. But no, if it disintegrated, I'd see dust or residue. After minutes of fruitless search, I sat back on my haunches and forced myself to think logically. If a sister had found it, I'd already be in custody. No way would she quietly put it back or just walk off. There'd be alarms, prayer choruses, a full inquisition. So likely none of them saw it yet. It must be here somewhere. I took a deep breath and slowed down, scanning with my eyes carefully. There, a tiny gleam under the wooden footlocker at the end of my cot. I lunged forward, reaching under. My fingers closed on the shard. Relief washed over me so strongly I nearly cried out. It was as if I'd found a lost child, an absurd depth of attachment for a damnable thing. I quickly stowed it back in the pouch and fastened it securely, making sure it couldn't slip free again. As I secured it, a prickling ran over my palm, the same old warmth reigniting briefly. I felt a flood of what I can only describe as welcome emanating from the shard, almost like it was happy I had found it. I recoiled at the thought. Was I truly empathizing with a piece of warped glass now? This was getting out of hand. I had to act. The plan from last night came back. Speak to the canoness, request purification rites for possible taint. Perhaps omit the detail that I had knowingly kept a chaos artifact. Yes, better to frame it as inadvertent exposure. She might be less severe if I appeared proactive and honest. Before I lost my nerve, I left the barracks to seek Canoness Magda. The fortress we'd set up in was an old administratum building. I remember walking through the corridors, passing fellow sisters who greeted me with nods or brief "Emperor be with you" salutations. I returned the words automatically, though they felt strange on my tongue. My throat was dry. I worried they could see something in my face, a guilt, a stain. But I had my helmet on, faceplate open but still partly shadowing me, and none gave me more than a passing glance. Outside the Canoness's office, I faltered. Magda was already speaking with someone. Raised voices seeped through the thick door. I caught snippets. Something about reinforcements, and we leave within the hour. After a moment, the door opened, and out stepped a man in a long leather coat adorned with the inquisitorial eye. I instinctively stiffened. Inquisitor Halix. I'd met him briefly when we first arrived on planet. He had liaised with our forces, but left the main action to us. I didn't realize he was still planetside. He gave me a curt nod as he passed. "Sister," he acknowledged. I bowed my head respectfully, not trusting my voice around such a figure. Magda's gravelly voice called from within, "Who is it? Come in." I entered and stood at attention, removing my helmet. The Canoness was strapping on her own gauntlets, looking battle-ready. She was a formidable woman in her late middle years, gray streaking her close-cropped black hair, a jagged scar across her left cheek. That morning, she looked particularly grim. "Forgive the interruption, revered Canoness," I began, my voice betraying a slight tremor despite my effort to sound steady. "I request counsel. I fear I may have been tainted by the sorcery last night. I beg purification, perhaps quarantine." She held up a hand, cutting me off. "No time for that now, sister. The Inquisitor has detected a warp anomaly nearby, a sign that not all of the cult's filth was cleansed. We are moving out to scour whatever remains." She paused to fix me with a hard stare. "If you suspect any taint in you, steel yourself and pray. There will be rites after battle, but duty comes first." I was stunned into silence. Not only had I not expected this response, but her eyes on me made my blood run cold. Did she know? Or was she simply unsympathetic to any hint of weakness before a mission? Canoness Magda was not known for motherly softness, but she was just. If I had insisted I might be compromised, usually protocol would sideline me, or at least assign a confessor to watch me. Her dismissiveness was oddly out of character. "Yes, Canoness," I murmured, bowing. "I shall not fail." She nodded briskly. "Good. Arm yourself for heavy combat. If the great enemy stirs, we must be prepared for worse than cultists." I inquired if we knew the nature of the warp anomaly. She grimaced. "The Inquisitor believes a minor demon may have been summoned or released when that ritual last night was interrupted. The mirror breaking, that psychic blast, it may have been a gateway. Our Auspex readings show unnatural energy in the catacombs under the city. We're to investigate and purge. Now go rally with your squad." A demon, perhaps the very one in my dreams. My stomach lurched with both fear and a twisted anticipation. "By your leave," I whispered, retreating. She was already turning to Vox orders to other sisters. Racing to the arming chamber, I felt my thoughts whirling. A part of me had hoped to be removed from duty, given a chance to clear my head. Now I was heading right back into the thick of it, into what could be a direct confrontation with the source of my corruption. This might be good, I reasoned. If I faced the demon, perhaps I could resist it, prove my faith, maybe even slay it, and thus expunge its hold on me. A desperate hope, but it gave me something to cling to. We deployed within the hour. A contingent of 20 sisters, including my squad and a few from another that had arrived for reinforcement. plus Inquisitor Halix and 2 of his retinue, stern-looking stormtroopers with hell guns. We descended into the ancient catacombs beneath the city, the place apparently aligned with the source of the warp signatures. It was dark as a tomb. Indeed, it was a tomb. These tunnels were lined with the dust of millennia-old graves. Our helmet lamps cut cones through the thick dust in the air. The further we went, the more a sense of unease grew. The walls began to bear strange organic-looking growths, like veins of pink and purple crystals spreading along the stone. The air itself shimmered faintly, as if reality were sweating. I gripped my bolter tight, finger on the trigger. I could feel the shard in my pouch again, pulsing faintly with heat, like a compass guiding me onward. It practically vibrated the deeper we went. I found I knew we were going the right way, not from the Inquisitor's scanner readings, but from a tug in my gut synced to that warmth, pulling me forward. It frightened and exhilarated me. Finally, we reached a large burial chamber, circular with domed ceiling, once a sanctum for remembrance, now transformed. The funeral caskets had been pushed aside to make room for an elaborate mosaic across the floor, gleaming with freshly applied pigments and metals. It depicted a sigil of Slaanesh, nearly spanning the entire room, a curved, twisting glyph that hurt the eyes to trace. At each cardinal point of the chamber stood a tall candlestick, holding candles of violet flame, casting lurid shadows. And at the center kneeled a creature out of a nightmare and a perverse dream combined. It was a daemonette. Though I had never seen one with my own eyes before, I knew it from descriptions. The lithe, feminine form, simultaneously alluring and horrifying. It knelt as if in prayer or exhaustion, its clawed hands resting on the ground. Its skin was a pale lavender hue, shimmering, and from its brow sprouted a crown of small ivory horns. It seemed to be singing. A low, lilting melody hummed from its throat, and I realized those violet candles' flames were undulating in time with the song. At our intrusion, the creature slowly lifted its head and opened eyes like black mirrors. A wide, sharp-toothed smile split its delicate face. "Welcome, faithful," it purred, voice echoing in that unnatural way of demonic speech. For a heartbeat, we all stood stunned. It's not every day one hears a demon greet you politely. Then Inquisitor Halix stepped forward, brandishing a gleaming silver inquisitorial seal in one hand and his plasma pistol in the other. "Foul daemon, by the authority of the immortal Emperor and the Ordo Malleus, I hereby cast you back into the abyss," he proclaimed. He began chanting the rite of banishment, his voice strong. The daemonette rose gracefully to its feet. Unholy hell, it was tall, nearly 8 feet, though hunched in a predatory stance. It cocked its head, and as Halix recited litanies, it chuckled, a deeply mocking yet seductive sound. "The corpse god's dogs always yip the same tune," it sighed theatrically. "Very well, playtime then," and with terrifying speed, it lunged. The battle that erupted was chaos, in more ways than one. Bolters roared, hellgun beams sizzled, the daemonette leapt and whirled among us with uncanny agility. It moved like liquid, every motion both balletic and lethally precise. I saw one sister get gutted by its claws, another lifted and kissed by the thing, only for the sister's eyes to roll back in bliss as her soul was drained in that embrace, her body dropping as an empty husk. The sight filled me with anger and a sick flicker of envy that I immediately hated myself for. I fired burst after burst at the daemon, my rounds exploding against its unnatural flesh. Shredded wounds opened up in it, spilling ichor that smelled of sugar and rot. But it only laughed, the wounds knitting slowly, not fast, but enough that it wasn't dying quickly. Inquisitor Halix's banishment rite seemed to agitate it. It hissed whenever he spoke certain holy words, so he kept at it while shooting plasma that charred smoking holes in its limbs. The combined onslaught was weakening it, but it also enraged the beast. Amid the cacophony, I felt the shard at my hip grow hotter. It was as if it were sharing the demon's excitement at the mayhem, or perhaps it was reacting to my adrenaline. Who knows? But I felt it throb in sync with my racing pulse. The demonette's black eyes flickered over the squad and landed on me. In that instant, something passed between us, like a shockwave of recognition. It bared its fanged grin in what I could swear was a smile directed only at me. And then, impossibly, I heard its voice in my head, even as its mouth was engaged in hissing and biting at others. Ah, the little dreamer. I remember you. Time seemed to slow. My bolter lowered a fraction as my mind reeled. It recognized me? Had I truly communed with this creature in my nightmare? A cold dread and a feverish thrill shot through me together. This was the presence, from the shard, from the mirror, from my dream. The very same demon it had to be. In my hesitation, I failed to notice it had coiled to spring straight at me. With a feral snarl, it pounced. I tried to dodge, bringing my weapon up, but too late. It swatted the bolter aside with one powerful arm. The gun clattered from my grip. Next, I felt an impact like a freight hauler as it slammed into me and bore me to the ground. Claws pinned my wrists. I was flat on my back, visor to face with the demon's unnervingly beautiful visage. My sister shouted and tried to get clear shots, but the creature used me as a shield, keeping itself low. I heard the Inquisitor roar, "Hold fire! Hold fire!" I struggled, but it was so damned strong. The damonette leaned down, pressing its cheek almost against mine, lips near my ear. My neck armor prevented it from simply biting my throat out, but it didn't seem in a hurry to kill. Instead, it nuzzled me and inhaled deeply, like one might sniff a fine bouquet. I shuddered, revulsion and unwanted pleasure rippling through me in equal measure. Its voice cooed inside my mind, inaudible to the others. "So much conflict in you, sweet one. I can taste your fear and your yearning." My rational mind was screaming to fight, to headbutt it, knee it, anything. But a fog of that same euphoria from before began to wash over me in its presence. My struggles weakened, muscles going slack. It was as if an intoxicating musk emanated from its very skin, seeping through my respirator. The world around me dimmed. Even the yells of my squad and hiss of weapons seemed distant. "That's it," the demon purred, licking a hot stripe up the side of my face. My skin tingled and burned where its tongue left a trail. "Give in. I have such sights to show you." Blam! A booming gunshot rang out. The demon's head snapped back, purple ichor spraying from a gaping exit wound. Sister Superior Kareen stood a few paces behind, her smoking bolt pistol aimed true. She had taken the risk of a headshot while it was distracted with me. The damonette shrieked in pain and fury, recoiling off of me. Immediately, strong arms hooked under mine and dragged me backwards, Johanna hauling me out of the fray. The creature wasn't dead, but ichor poured from its shattered skull, quickly regenerating tissue knitting over what must have been its brain. The Inquisitor seized the moment, stepping forth to thrust his silver seal forward, chanting louder. The rest of the squad opened fire now that I was clear, a hail of bolts and lasers tearing into the demon's torso. It howled, a dreadful, piercing sound that was half anger, half orgasmic rapture at the sensation of being so torn apart. With a final baleful glare, it seemed to implode into a cloud of sparkling violet vapor. The cloud swirled, then rushed away through a crack in the chamber wall, disappearing with a fading, girlish giggle. The damonette was banished for now. The fight was over, but we had suffered. At least 5 sisters lay dead or dying in the chamber. One of Halix's stormtroopers was decapitated messily. The rest of us were wounded to varying degrees, dazed or helping our injured. I was relatively unhurt physically, just a shallow claw mark on my left wrist where the creature had held me, and bruises. But inside I was in turmoil. Johanna was by my side, shouting, "Sister, are you hurt? Teresa, answer me!" She shook me, and I realized I was just kneeling there, staring at nothing. I snapped to attention. I'm fine, I managed. Just stunned, my voice sounded distant to my own ears. Karine came over, helmet off, sweat and blood on her face. She looked furious and relieved at once. "Teresa, you emperor-damned fool! Why did you freeze up like that?" she scolded me. "It nearly made you its plaything." I opened my mouth, but no words came. What could I say? That I had been enthralled by a demon's presence because I'd basically invited it into my soul already? Hardly. I'm sorry, Sister Superior, I stammered, lowering my eyes in shame. I could feel the demon's saliva still tingling on my cheek like a brand, and an insidious heat coiling in my stomach. I desperately wanted to lick my lips to see if its taste remained, but I held back such a horrifying impulse. Karine's expression softened slightly, seeing my obvious distress. She sighed and put a hand on my pauldron. "All right, it's all right. We're all rattled. That fiend had a beguiling aura. No shame, it tested us all. Just see the Hospitaller when we return. Make sure you're clean of any toxins or warpcraft. Understood?" I nodded mutely. She might have been trying to reassure me, but her words hit like a hammer. Hospitaller. Tests. They'd likely do a purity screening, maybe even a soul scryer if Helix insisted. If there was any warp taint in me, they would find it. Panic spiked in my chest. I could already imagine the alarm, being bound and... No, I had to do something, and quickly. The situation was spiraling out of my control. The demon had known me, marked me in front of my sisters, and though they didn't quite understand what happened, suspicions would be raised. If I allowed myself to be examined, I was as good as dead, one way or another. I retrieved my bolter from the ground and numbly followed the others as we limped out of that accursed chamber. The Inquisitor was talking with Canoness Magda. She had joined during the fight's end with reserve sisters, and I caught fragments. Helix was adamant that a root of corruption remained and that the hive might need to be purged more extensively. Magda was resisting, pointing out the populace had already largely been compliant, and it was only a minor cult. The Inquisitor, in turn, pointed at the casualties and the fact a demon had manifest as proof of deeper rot. Inwardly, I seethed at the thought of this entire city being purged, tens of thousands of lives snuffed out in atomic fire or mass executions because of me. For make no mistake, I was the deeper rot, wasn't I? That creature had come through the mirror, likely seeking me, or facilitated by me. Anger flared in me unexpectedly. All my life, I'd accepted such extreme measures as necessary in service to the Emperor's will. Exterminatus, cleansings, sacrifices of innocence. It was regrettable but justified if it protected humanity. But now, seeing it from this skewed angle, I felt a surge of indignation. Those people above had done nothing but be unfortunate enough to live here, and this Inquisitor would burn them all without a second thought. Just in case, because of my failing in a way. My failing, or was it my choice? A daring thought formed, one that horrified and enticed me. I could stop this. If I left, if I ran, drawing the corruption away with me, maybe Helix would deem the hive clean. Or if I eliminated Helix, my breath caught at that dark notion. Strike down an Inquisitor to save a city. Unthinkable for a loyal sister. But was I loyal anymore? I had to face it. My loyalty was hanging by a thread, fraying more with each passing hour. Each revelation, each injustice or doubt piling up was tipping the scales. I tried to recall the pure devotion I had felt for the Emperor just a day prior, the unquestioning faith. It felt like a dream. No, a lie, I told myself. Everything the demon had insinuated gnawed at me. Did I truly love the Emperor, or had I simply feared a world without that structure? Did I truly believe, or was I just too indoctrinated to consider alternatives? We emerged from the catacombs into harsh daylight. The surviving sisters formed up for roll call and casualty report. I saw bodies being carried out in bloodied cloth. Sister Aurelia, Sister Marion, Sister Pack. Emperor rest their souls. There was a weighty sorrow in that moment, the kind that usually would bring me to silent prayer for the fallen. But I could not pray. Instead, part of me envied them. Better to die pure than live tainted as I was. I stood there in formation, barely hearing Canoness Magda's words as she addressed us. She praised our efforts, mourned our sisters, thanked the Inquisitor, etc. My mind was elsewhere, racing. I felt a pulse from the shard at my hip again, as if echoing my frantic heartbeat. It was like it was urging me on, or agreeing with my rebellious thoughts. Slaanesh's talons dig deep, the phrase surfaced from some lesson long ago. Once they have a hold, they do not relent. The cravings, the doubts, the temptations, they'd only grow. And Emperor, help me, I wanted them to grow, even as they terrified me. I thought about the dream again, that seductive kindness in the dark. The idea of being seen, understood, and pleasured by a power that actually responds to my needs. It made my heart ache. The Emperor had never spoken to me, never given me a sign I wasn't telling myself to see. Yet, in a single night, another God's servant had given me rapture beyond anything I thought possible. How could I truly be expected to turn away from that now that I knew? My name was called. "Sister Teresa," Magda's voice snapped me back. I looked up to find she had been asking me something. The entire squad was staring at me strangely. "Attend, sister. I asked if you were certain you are unharmed and uncompromised after the demon's assault. You took a heavy blow." Her eyes bored into mine. She knows, or at least she suspects. They all might suspect now, seeing me dazed. I swallowed. This was the moment, here it was. I could come clean, throw myself at her mercy, confess my weakness and taint. Maybe, just maybe, she'd not execute me immediately. Perhaps I could be saved. I opened my mouth, and lies flowed forth smoothly, unexpectedly. "I am fine, Canoness, shaken but fine." The beast did not have time to work any trickery on me. My voice sounded almost normal, confident. "I am ready to continue serving." She studied me a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Very well." But I did not miss the flicker of doubt in her steely eyes. The rest of that day was a blur. We returned to our garrison. There were debriefings, medical checks. I managed to decline the more thorough exam by the hospitaller, claiming only minor scratches that I'd tended myself. Karine vouched that I hadn't been seriously injured. The Inquisitor was thankfully occupied with analyzing the cult's remains and deciding his next steps. I largely kept to myself when not required. I felt like I was walking on a razor's edge. At any moment, I expected alarm bells to ring and stormtroopers to burst in to drag me to the pyre. But the hours passed and I remained free. Free, but in a state of feverish agitation. That evening, I made my decision. It had been crystallizing all day, deep in my subconscious, and finally I acknowledged it. I would not, could not continue like this. If I stayed one way or another, I would be discovered. And I realized I didn't want to be saved by the Imperium's methods. I didn't want an exorcism or to be purged. I wanted to pursue that feeling again, the one that was even now humming inside me whenever I let my guard down. Yes, That was the stark truth I had avoided saying outright. I wanted more. The little tastes of bliss and liberation I'd sampled were not enough. They had awoken a ravenous hunger in my soul. I felt as if I'd been starving my entire life and only now had taken my first bite of real food. How could anyone expect me to push away from the table now? In the dead of night, I snuck from my cot, fully dressed and armored. I had pretended to retire but never removed my gear, claiming I wanted to do extra chapel prayer. Nobody questioned a sister wanting to pray more. With practiced silence, I crept through the corridors of the makeshift convent. 2 sisters stood guard at the main exit. I avoided them by heading instead to a sally port that I knew was damaged from the earlier war and seldom used. I had scouted it mentally before. There would likely be one guard stationed in the hall beyond it. Sure enough, as I eased open the side door, I saw a single figure at the end of the hallway, a flamer in hand, looking half asleep. My heart panged when I recognized her. Sister Johanna. Of all the luck, she had been a friend, or as close to one as our life allowed, ever since we were initiated. We'd bled together on a dozen worlds, and she had pulled me out of the demon's clutches just this morning. If there was one sister I owed honesty to, perhaps it was her. For a moment I considered just walking up to her, telling her I was leaving and why. Maybe she'd step aside, but that was a foolish hope. Johanna's faith was as solid as any. She'd try to stop me, and then I'd hurt her. I didn't want that. I reached to my belt and withdrew a tranq vial and injector, part of a medikit. I had thought to take it in case I needed to silently eliminate someone. Loading the syringe, I crept forward. Emperor, forgive me, I truly meant only to knock her out, to spare her any pain or guilt. I was nearly close enough to lunge when she turned, perhaps hearing a faint scuff of my armor. Her eyes widened in surprise. Teresa, what are you doing up? She asked casually, clearly not yet understanding. I made a split-second decision. I straightened and walked toward her openly. Can't sleep, I whispered, forcing a chuckle. Thought I'd get some fresh air, maybe do a perimeter walk to clear my head. It's been a day. She nodded sympathetically, lowering her guard. It has. I can't shake the image of poor Aurelia's face. Emperor grant her peace. Johanna sighed, then offered a small smile. I don't mind the company, but you should be resting. We were face to face now, just one step between us. I felt a surge of affection and guilt. She cared about me in her stoic way. If things were different, I might have confided in her long ago, but it was too late. I'll rest soon. I just needed a moment, I said softly. Thank you, sister. And before she could react, I darted forward and jammed the injector to her neck seal where the armor was thinner, releasing the sedative. Her eyes went wide with betrayal and confusion. She tried to raise her flamer, but her limbs were already sluggish. Teresa, why? She slurred as her knees buckled. I caught her gently, easing her down. She wasn't fully unconscious. Her eyes searched mine with hurt. Thrown, that look almost undid me. Tears stung my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered, choking back emotion. I have to. She made a weak grab at my gorget. Don't, please, Emperor, guide ye. The drug finally pulled her under into a deep sleep, her words dying off. I laid her on her side, checking she could breathe. She'd be out for at least an hour, likely more. If fate was kind, by the time she was awake and raised the alarm, I'd be long gone. I took her flamer and sidearm, no telling what dangers lay ahead. One last look at her peaceful, unconscious face, and I steeled myself. No more hesitation. I slipped out into the night. The hive city sprawled quiet under the stars, curfew in effect. I kept to the alleys and shadows, moving with purpose. Where was I going? I wasn't entirely sure, except away. Perhaps to the spaceport to stow away, or to lose myself in the underhive. But also, I felt a pull, a familiar tugging at my senses. The shard seemed almost to vibrate like a compass pointing somewhere, and I realized where I was heading, back toward the underhive, near where it all began. Sure enough, as I followed that inner guidance, I began to hear faint strains of music on the wind. A distant throb of bass, a lilting pipe, sounds out of place in the sleeping city. I descended old maintenance shafts and wound through service tunnels. The music grew louder, interwoven with muffled laughter and moans. Finally, I emerged onto a ledge overlooking what might have once been a water treatment plant, now long dry and converted into a bizarre subterranean pleasure den. Candles and lumen strips of colored light cast a hazy glow. I saw perhaps 24 people below, some clearly hive locals, others wearing the telltale eccentric garb of cultists. They were engaged in revelry, drinking from jewel-encrusted flagons, dancing to that strange music, and performing acts I shall not describe in detail. At the center of it all stood a statue, no, a person, painted head to toe in swirling patterns, posing as still as a statue on a plinth. They depicted Slaanesh in their androgynous beauty, one half of their body painted male, the other half female, intertwined. Before this living idol, acolytes brought offerings, boxes of spices, vials of collected tears, what looked like the beating heart of some creature, all laid at the idol's feet. The whole scene should have revolted me. Once I would have immediately opened fire, called for backup to cleanse this heresy with righteous fury. Now I felt an almost magnetic draw. This was a sanctuary of the very thing I'd been craving. It was as if I had wandered an icy wasteland and suddenly stumbled into a warm, fragrant tavern full of mirth. My heart pounded with excitement and fear. Perhaps I could have remained hidden, observing a while, but impatience gnawed at me. And perhaps some subconscious desire to prove I was truly committed pushed me. Instead of sneaking, I stepped off the ledge and allowed my armored boots to clang on the metal staircase leading down. Immediately, heads turned toward the noise. The music died abruptly as a snake-charming pipe gave a discordant squeak, all eyes fixed on me, an armored figure descending into their midst with weapons in hand. A tense beat passed. I saw a few cultists scramble for weapons, knives, a few crude slug pistols. Some looked ready to flee. I swung the flamer to cover the room, finger on the trigger. But I did not fire. Uncertainty held both sides still. Finally, one of the cultists, a tall man with elaborate piercings and a robe of tattered silk, stepped forward, hands spread placatingly. "Easy now," he cooed. "We mean you no harm, sister." He must have recognized my sororitas armor in the dim light. I gave a short, harsh laugh at the absurdity. "No harm? I very much doubt that, heretic. You lot have caused plenty of harm." My voice didn't sound as firm as I expected. It wavered, betraying my own nerves. Murmurs spread among the group. They were confused why I hadn't torched them yet, I could tell. The painted idol person suddenly spoke, startling me. In a resonant, lilting voice that echoed off the chamber walls, they said, "Welcome, daughter of battle. We have been expecting you." A chill rippled over my skin. Expecting me? My flamer's pilot light flickered as my arms unconsciously trembled. The idol figure stepped down from their plinth with fluid grace. Their followers parted respectfully. Up close, I saw that it was a young person, perhaps barely older than a boy, though their features were such that one moment they looked feminine, the next masculine, an ever-shifting allure. They wore almost nothing but artistic swirls of pigment and a loincloth, and an 8-pointed star pendant on their chest. In one hand, they held a chalice that steamed with some fragrant concoction. They offered the chalice toward me. She who thirsts told us a lost child would find her way to our little celebration tonight. Drink if you desire, and be welcomed under the veil of Princess Slaanesh. At the mention of a name, Slaanesh, I guessed a demon's name or a cult aspect of Slaanesh. The others around murmured a quick phrase in unison that sounded like a debauched prayer. My heart was beating wildly. This was it. This was the point of no return. All I had to do was pull the trigger, and this nest of sin would burn. I could still choose the Emperor. I could at least make my end a righteous one, purge them, and then face my own judgment. I thought of Johanna's face, pleading with me even in her sleep. I thought of the canoness, of my sisters, of all I'd lived for. Duty, honor, purity, sacrifice. Then I thought of the whispered promises in the dark, of pleasure beyond imagining, of being seen and loved. I thought of how empty I had felt in that moment praying alone, and how alive I felt when the demon touched me. With a hiss of exhalation, I lowered the flamer. My decision was made, not in that moment, but truly it had been made piece by piece in every act of indulgence and deceit so far. I had crossed the threshold long ago. This moment was merely formalizing it. The tension in the room eased palpably as I lowered the weapon. I reached up and unclasped my helmet, removing it so they could see my face. I imagine I must have looked wild-eyed, tear-streaked and wretched, but also perhaps hopeful in a sick way. I thirst, I said softly, echoing their word. It was true. Emperor, forgive me, I thirsted so badly for what they offered. My throat was practically burning with it. A collective sigh, almost of relief, swept the cultists. The painted youth smiled brilliantly, their eyes alight with triumph. They stepped closer, chalice still extended. Cautiously, I took it in my gauntleted hand, sniffing. The concoction within was warm and aromatic, smelling of spiced wine and something sweet. I knew it was likely drugged or some mystical brew. A final test of my resolve. Without further hesitation, I lifted it and drank deeply. It was wine, yes, but laced with other flavors, cinnamon, rose, and a metallic tang of blood. It filled my mouth and hit my senses like a freight train. Within seconds of swallowing, I felt a flush spread through my body, a warmth more potent than any strong liquor could provide. My vision sharpened and blurred at once, colors becoming vibrant halos around each candle flame. My tongue tingled. A low gasp escaped me. What is? I tried to ask, but the idle person gently took the chalice back and simply said, Ambrosia, gift of the Prince of Excess. Fear not. I realized I wasn't afraid. The concoction was melting away my anxiety, replacing it with a syrupy euphoria and a strange clarity. It was as if I could suddenly hear a new harmony in the music that had resumed quietly around us, see an extra wavelength of color in the air. The youth, likely the cult leader here, took my hand and guided me further in. Welcome, sister, he said. I settled on he in my mind for simplicity, though he was almost genderless. We are the chosen of the Violet Widow, and we have much to show you. Thus began my induction into the cult of Slaanesh. That night was a blur of sights and sounds, pleasures and pains all blending together. They helped me remove parts of my armor. So heavy and restrictive, I thought, as I peeled it off piece by piece, assisted by gentle hands. Each piece that fell away felt like shedding a shackle. Beneath, I wore the simple body glove of a sister. Even that eventually felt stifling and was exchanged for a silken robe that barely clung to me. There was dancing. This time I danced awake, not just in dreams, moving with abandon as music swirled. They showed me artifacts, sensors that emitted clouds of narcotic vapors. One sniff made my head swim delightfully. A sensuous whip that one girl demonstrated on my arm, Its lash sparked pain that bloomed into pleasure in a way eerily similar to what I'd accidentally found with my flail, except this time I did not recoil. I moaned, and they laughed with delight that I was so receptive. They asked me to tell my story, how I had come here, and I did in halting pieces, feeling strangely liberated by admitting it all. The more I spoke, the more the group cooed in sympathy or excitement at key points, especially when I described the dream meeting with the demon and the battle. I realized I was essentially giving a confession, but not to absolve my sins, rather to celebrate them. And they accepted every word, like a congregation enthralled by a sermon. At some point, the cultists and I were lounging on piles of cushions, passing around exotic fruits to bite into, oils to anoint our skin, and Emperor knows what else. I felt someone's hands massaging my shoulders, working out knots of tension I'd carried for years. Another was painting curling designs on my cheeks and forehead with a delicate brush dipped in violet ink. "We'll cover that ugly scar," she murmured kindly as she traced over a scar by my temple I'd gotten from shrapnel long ago. It struck me. They were beautifying me for no reason other than kindness, or what passes for it among heretics. The Imperium would have never bothered to coddle or comfort in such a way. At some point, when I was pleasantly drowsy and blissed out from a dozen minor indulgences, I noticed the cult leader in deep conversation with the shadowy figure at the edge of the gathering. It was Canoness Magda. I bolted upright in shock, only to realize no, it was a trick of the light. The woman's bearing and armor shape were similar, but the colors were different, and the face when she stepped closer was not Magda at all. It was an older woman, though, stern-faced, but clearly another convert or leader. She approached me. Instinctively, I scrambled to cover myself, a reflex of modesty. But my reflexes were slow and a bit laughable given everything. She seated herself on a divan next to me. The others respectfully withdrew a little, giving her space. This told me she was someone of importance. She wore a set of carapace armor painted in rich purples and blacks, etched with swirling patterns. An 8-pointed star medallion hung at her throat, and she had a circlet on her brow with a purple gem that glowed softly. Her face was lined, probably in her 50s or 60s Terran standard, though her eyes held a wicked youthful spark. Most telling of all, she bore a tattoo on her cheek, the fleur-de-lis of the Adepta Sororitas, overlaid with a thin slash through it. She had been a sister. I wasn't the first. "So," she said in a low, measured tone, "you are the one who attracted dear Lanaskiel's attention." Lanaskiel. I guessed that was the demon's name indeed. I nodded silently. She looked me over appraisingly. "I can see why. Such fire in your heart, and now the spark of true pleasure in your eyes." She actually smiled softly. "I am Lyria, once of the Order of the Ebon Chalice, many years ago." She extended a gauntleted hand in greeting. I reached out and we clasped forearms in the old Sororitas manner unconsciously. It made me giggle. Somehow the gesture felt absurdly formal, given I was wearing a flimsy silk robe, half-drugged, and she was a corrupted veteran. Heretic or not, seeing a former sister made me blurt out, How did you stand it? The years of pretending after you turned. They say none of us ever stray." She chuckled, patting my arm. "Oh, some of us do. Rarely, but it happens. The lucky ones find their way to Slaanesh's embrace. The unlucky are caught and made examples of." Her eyes hardened momentarily, as if recalling something. "As for pretending, some do for a while. I did. But eventually, you reach a point where you simply cannot wear the mask any longer. Sounds like you reached it rather quickly, hmm?" I flushed, nodding. I had, indeed. Less than 2 days and I was here. I nearly lost it entirely after that dream and the battle today. I thought I could hide it longer, but she shrugged. Every journey is different. Slaanesh wanted you now, clearly. Who are we to deny the Dark Prince? At the mention of the god, she made a gesture with her hand, a looping sign in the air which others around mirrored. Noticing I hadn't done it, she took my hand and guided me through the motion. Our devotion has its rituals too, dear. You'll learn them soon enough. I was filled with 1,000 questions, but one pressed out. What will happen to me now? They'll come for me, you know. My order, the Inquisition. I knocked out a fellow sister to get here, and when they find I'm gone, they'll hunt me. Lyria's expression grew wolfish. Let them come. We can relocate easily. We've done it before. And if some chase you, well, perhaps you might relish a chance to face your old comrades under a new banner. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. The idea of raising a weapon against my sisters still made my stomach clench with residual loyalty or guilt. She saw my hesitation and squeezed my hand. In time, that pain will fade. Slaanesh will fill the void of camaraderie you lost. We are your sisters now. She swept her other arm at the assembled cultists, who smiled and toasted to that. I even got some cheers, which oddly brought a lump to my throat. They wanted me here. Suddenly, a hushed reverence fell over everyone. Many dropped to their knees or bowed their heads. Lyria stood and urged me to do the same. I scrambled up, heart pounding again. What is it? I whispered. She looked upward, eyes shining. She comes. At first, I thought she meant some enemy or intruder, but then I felt it. A pressure in the air, a rising energy similar to the earlier warp surge, but far more controlled, deliberate. The violet candle flames around us stretched high, almost vertical. The music stopped as instruments were set aside. In the center of the gathering space, a shimmering haze coalesced, like heat distortion. From that haze, a figure emerged, Lanaskiel, the daemonette we had banished, or rather, who had fled. She stepped fully into reality, her form solidifying. Gasps and sighs went through the cult. This was clearly an extraordinary honor for them to witness their patron demon in person. For me, it was a shock, but not a fearful one this time. No, now I felt like a lover reuniting with someone after a long separation. I drank in the sight. She was, as I recalled, tall, sinuous, her lavender skin flawless and enticing. The horns on her head curled elegantly. She wore a sort of flowing sash around her torso now, diaphanous and decorative rather than concealing. And her eyes, those dark, infinite eyes, settled immediately on me. Lanaskiel's lips parted in a predatory grin. "Ah, my sweet dreamer, you found your way." Her voice dripped with pleasure and pride. The demon approached where I kneeled. I should have perhaps been cautious. Here was the very agent of my corruption. But in that moment, I felt only elation. I broke protocol, if such exists at a demon summoning, by rising from my knees as she drew near. I couldn't contain myself. Tears spilled from my eyes as I choked out, I'm here. I came. Like you wanted." She laughed softly and opened her arms. Without hesitation, I fell into the embrace of a demon. Her skin was warm and soft, her claws gently stroking my hair. It was bizarrely comforting, like being cradled by something both motherly and lustful. "Yes, you did. Clever, brave girl. Such a good girl." The praise was like ambrosia. My heart soared hearing it. I realized dimly that the entire cult was watching this interaction with awe and envy. In that moment, I was the focus of a demon's affection, and they all wished they were so favored. A flash of pride went through me. Favored. Yes, I was favored, wasn't I? Chosen out of all those in the battle, she had seen something in me worth saving, or corrupting. Semantics. Lenaskiel pulled back enough to study my face. One claw gently wiped my tears. No more tears for them, pet. You're free now. Free. The word resounded in me. Was I truly free? In some ways more than ever. Free of the strictures that had bound my every thought. And yet I was also bound anew, this time by desire. But it was a binding I accepted willingly. Better a gilded cage you choose than an iron one you're thrown into, perhaps. That night blurred again in a haze of newfound debauchery as the demon itself joined the festivities. It personally saw to my initiation in ways I shall not graphically detail. Suffice to say, my last vestiges of restraint were torn away in a flood of sensation so overwhelming that at times I feared I would literally die from pleasure. And a tiny rational voice in the corner of my mind said that perhaps I did, in a manner of speaking. The last version of Sister Teresa died that night on a bed of satin under a laughing, merciless angel of excess. I emerged from that ordeal a different creature. They gave me a new name. Still thinking of it sends a thrill through me. Theresia, the Thirsting, they called me, for my unquenchable desire to taste all that had been denied. I rather like it. It feels more me than Teresa ever did. By dawn, we had to flee that den, as expected. The alarms had gone out. An apostate sororitas on the loose, a dangerous heretic, shoot on sight. We relocated to another safe haven, then another, traveling through secret networks that Lyria and the others had established. All the while, I remained by Lenaskiel's side like a devoted familiar. The daemon could not remain in the mortal plane constantly. Summoning even a lesser keeper of secrets like her takes a toll. But she was with us often, enough to guide me. I won't pretend the transition was without difficulty. There were moments my old self surged up. Guilt, horror at what I'd done, fear of divine retribution. Once, early on, I even woke from a nightmare screaming the litany of absolution, thinking myself damned and begging Emperor's forgiveness. But Lenaskiel was there, crooning to me, smothering those fears with kisses and claws until I remembered I didn't want absolution. I wanted this path, with all its damnation. As the days turned to weeks, I threw myself into learning the ways of Slaanesh with the same fervor I once applied to devotion. Studying profane texts that would have seared my eyes before now only excited me. Practicing warpcraft, learning to channel the minor psychic gifts the Dark Prince saw fit to awaken in me. Yes, I even manifested a few mutations, or blessings as we call them. The first was subtle. My eyes took on an unnatural, lustrous sheen, with a thought I can mesmerize the weak-willed by meeting their gaze. Useful, as it helped us avoid bloodshed by simply charming some pursuers or skeptics to let us pass. Later, the more visible changes began, a slight fusing of 2 fingers on my left hand, which frightened me. Lenaskiel teased that perhaps I'd get a proper claw like hers. But it stopped short of that, the 2 fingers merely webbed, more dexterous actually. My skin became even paler and strangely iridescent under light, almost like a pearlescent finish. A symbol etched itself over my heart one morning, the mark of Slaanesh, they told me proudly, appearing like a faint scar or tattoo without anyone physically doing it. These changes oddly did not repulse me, as I'd have thought. Instead, I took them with a twisted pride. Signs that I was truly becoming something new. Eventually, inevitably, we had to face my former sisters. Word reached us that a particularly determined kill team from my order, led by none other than Canoness Magda and Inquisitor Halix, had traced us to a remote outpost where we were rallying with other cult allies. There was no option to flee further. They had cornered us and intended to end it. Lenaskiel was summoned at the onset of the battle, giving us a fighting chance. I fought. Emperor, did I fight? against those I once called family. It was a bloodbath on both sides, but in the thick of it, clarity came over me. I remember facing Magda herself across a burning courtyard. She still wore the same scarred power armor, the same bolt pistol drawn. But gone was her stoic calm. In her eyes I saw rage and heartbreak mingled. To her I was a betrayal made flesh. Not just me, but Lyria and other fallen sisters who stood beside me. Our existence was an offense that cut her to the quick. She yelled something over the din, perhaps my name or some damning scripture. I couldn't hear. I just recall we fired at the same time. My shot? A searing blast from a noise-bringer gun I'd taken up, a weapon that emits lethal sound, hit her square in the torso, cracking her breastplate and sending her reeling. Her bolt round took me in the side, punching through my lighter armor and exploding. Agony, real, raw pain, blossomed as shards of ceramite and shrapnel tore my flesh. I collapsed behind cover, gasping, blood pouring. If I still believed in him, I'd have prayed then. But instead I found myself calling Lanaskiel, like a child calls for mother. And she came. Oh, she came with fury. The demon barreled into Magda before the canoness could finish me off. I will spare graphic details. Suffice that the duel ended with Magda's head separated from her body, her face still locked in an expression of utter disappointment. Perhaps that did haunt me for a time. But the rush of victory and maybe loss of blood muted my grief. I survived. Slaanesh grants resilience to his favored. My wound was tended, their methods unorthodox, an ecstatic ritual that numbed pain and stimulated rapid regrowth. I now have a webbing of fine scars there that strangely resemble a blooming rose when seen in certain light. So the chase ended. I was free of my old life for good, not just spiritually, but practically. Those who hunted me were dead or scattered. A new chapter began as I fully embraced my role among the Slaaneshi. I became an instrument of experience, traveling from world to world, spreading our cult's influence in subtle ways at first, converting disillusioned hive nobles with clandestine parties of excess, infiltrating pilgrim ships to whisper heresy, sweet as candy, into the ears of the devout but discontent. Occasionally, less subtle, there were times we simply unleashed hell in the streets to send a message that the Lord of Pleasure was rising. And now, here I stand, or rather recline on silken cushions in a perfumed pleasure barge, drifting through the upper atmosphere of a pleasure moon, to be exact, recounting how I came to be me, the woman I am now, an apostate, a heretic, a proud servant of Slaanesh, a traitor to everything I once held dear. Do I regret it, you wonder? Ha! I can smile as I ask myself that. The old me would expect any shred of my original soul to be writhing in guilt and regret. But the truth is as bitter as it is sweet. I do not regret a thing. Not anymore. Perhaps in those early days I felt torn, but now I only pity those I left behind. My sisters, the Imperium at large, they live half alive, blind and numb to the true spectrum of sensation and freedom that exists. I wish I could show them, make them feel even a fraction of what I have felt. But they would call it perversion, heresy, and yes, it is both. They would rather break themselves on the wheel of duty than admit they secretly yearn for more out of existence. And so we will likely meet on the battlefield again, them and I. They will try to kill what I represent, and I will try to enlighten them through their suffering. My perspective has shifted so far that I sometimes struggle to recall how it felt to be faithful and dutiful. It's like trying to remember being a child. One has vague images, but the emotions are distant. That zealot in power armor who refused to let herself feel. She was just a step on the path leading to this person here who revels in every feeling. They taught us in the Scholastica that temptation is the weapon of chaos, and once you invite it in, it will consume you. I scoff now at the simplicity of that. Yes, it consumed me, and from inside the belly of the beast, I emerged renewed. I am both consumed and consumer, destroyed and remade. A paradox much like the Dark Prince I serve. Damnation feels sweet. I said that at the start, and I'll say it at the end, louder, with conviction. If that damns me further, so be it. The corpse god of terror sits silent on his throne, while the pulse of true life beats strong in the realms of chaos. Perhaps one day humanity will understand that. Until then, we who have seen the truth will dance in the shadows, exulting in every forbidden delight. To any who hear this and feel a sting of curiosity, a pang of longing, know that your soul is already halfway in our embrace. Don't fight it. Life's too fleeting and dull to waste on your knees to a deity who never responds. Slaanesh answers. Oh, does she answer, with gifts and feelings beyond imagination. I have fully, finally given myself to that promise. The last chain of loyalty to the Imperium lies shattered at my feet like so many broken prayers. In its place, a silken bond of love and excess entwines my heart, leading me onward into an eternity of experience. And I go willingly, gratefully, ecstatically. Once I was Sister Teresa of the Order of the Sacred Rose, a warrior maiden of the Emperor. Now I am Teresia the Thirsting, favored of Slaanesh, a bride of the Dark Prince. I have fallen, yes, fallen into the most rapturous abyss, and I do not miss the light above, not one bit. My only wish is that I had leapt sooner, and if that is blasphemy, well then let me be damned. I am damned, and I have never felt more alive.